So this is the second of 4 talks that I call the doctor's opinion. In the first talk, I talk about the reward pathway, and the reward pathway deep down inside the brain is a primitive decision-making system. So what? The issue is that it's a primitive decision-making system that is turned on by drugs. But the question that often comes up is, but wait on, doctor. Everybody's got that. Everybody's got that reward pathway in their brain. How come some of us get addicted and others don't? That leads into this second talk. And the second talk that I'm giving today is about genetics. As a young man, I found it very hard to excuse my father for his bender drinking. My father had shocking bender drinking alcoholism. He had the sort of drinking that's undeniably alcoholic. He would go weeks, months, occasionally years without a drink. And he passed for normal, passed for, a chain-smoking, potty-mouthed lawyer sort of normal, but he passed for normal. But then he'd take a drink and he'd tell us all that it's going to be fine. I'll just have a couple, just going to have a little party tonight. But we all knew what was going to happen. We knew before too long he'd be in bed with a bottle like a baby, bellowing for somebody to get him some more because he'd finished the whiskey. And it was pathetic. But it did make me prone to think that there really is a disease called alcoholism, because he was like chalk and cheese. Him with alcohol and without alcohol was so different. But in 1975, I'm at med school, and this guy comes on and gives us a talk, and he told the audience, but it was like he was telling me, my head's ringing. It's like, there's a genetic effect. It's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. What's the proof of that? And he cited this American study of the Swedish adoption registers and the Swedish alcoholism registers. Okay. Probably go back a little bit, okay, before we get into that. How could you prove that it was genetic? Most likely they come up, you could do family studies. Yes, you could, but it's tricky to do family studies because you're trying to separate out nature and nurture when they've happened in the same environment. How do you separate out the trauma of living in an addict alcoholic household from receiving genes from your parents who might be the source of that trauma because they're addicted? How do you unattach those two things? Adoption studies. When a man and a woman love each other very much, you know that story? Yeah, okay. Well, what happens is you've got a great big ovum that is surrounded by thousands and thousands of sperm. A great big ovum. You've seen the videos, haven't you? Online? How big the egg is compared to all those tiny little sperm. Why is that? Because the sperm is just a little head of DNA. 23 chromosomes in a head of DNA and a tail to wiggle it from the man into the woman, up the fallopian tubes. I'm looking for an egg. And then the thousands of them surrounded, and I don't know what the magic is that happens, but the egg decides just one is coming through. That one sperm swims through and goes into the nucleus of that great big ovum, and the 23 chromosomes from dad meet with the 23 chromosomes with mum and form a 46 chromosome nucleus, and then a new human develops from that. Okay? So you get all of your intracellular organisms, all of them come from mum. Your Golgi apparatus, your endoplasmic reticulum, your mitochondria, they all come from mum. Dad only gives DNA. So if you follow sons of fathers, those sons having been adopted out, those fathers having been alcoholic, those sons, the only thing they have had to do with their father is those 23 chromosomes. Okay, so baby's born, mum's not in a situation to look after the child, baby gets adopted out, goes to the best home that the adoption agency can find. And so by that means, you get a controlled environment. And in Sweden, they kept a register of all adoptees. And in Sweden, they also kept a register of all alcoholics. And so some clever American thought, I know, we'll just merge those two data sets. This was in 1974, so it wasn't easy, right? It was very painstaking. But eventually what they did was they matched them all up. And the analysis was family history positive versus family history negative. And for every one alcoholic in the family history negative group, every one, there were 4 alcoholics in the family history positive group. And there's only one way to explain that, and that's Dad's DNA, okay? Now, in science, doing that one time could be a fluke, okay? Could be just one of those things. Could be something about the Swedes. Can't be something about the adoptees because they were all adoptees in both arms of the study. It was a study of adoptees, not a study about adoptees. What if adoptees have got an alcoholic biological parent that they've never seen, never met? 4 times increased chance. Guess what? That experiment has been repeated on multiple occasions and always comes up with very similar results. Now, again, in science, if you want to know something, you need to do more than one experiment. But if you really want to know something, you do multiple experiments from different angles. So, what's another way that you can control for environment? Twins, okay? Same-sex twins. If the eggs surrounded by all the sperm up the left fallopian tube, and that's conceived, the ones who went up the right fallopian tube, they got nothing, except if mum is particularly fertile and she's popped another egg that month. And if that one gets fertilised, then you have fraternal twins. So that's like a brother and a sister, or 2 brothers, 2 sisters. And typically in these studies, they only do same-sex fraternal twins because if you're a boy and a girl, you get treated differently. You know, maybe you go to different schools, you play different sports, you hang out with different friends and all of that. But if you're same sex, 2 different conceptions, same sex, and then you probably go to the same school, you wear the same uniform, you get treated the same by your parents. And so that way you control for environment and you can compare same-sex twins, same-sex fraternal twins with identical twins. So what happens with identical twins? One ovum, lots of sperm, one sperm goes in and then forms the beginnings of a human being, divides. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Somewhere around that tiny little cluster of cells, it splits and goes from 16 to 2 8s, to 2 16s, to 2 32s, etc. And that's what identical twins are. That is, they have virtually identical DNA. So you'd expect, if you do the study and you compare the fraternal same-sex twins with the identical twins, who are always same-sex, well then there'd be more concordance, they'd match better. If one's alcoholic, the other one will be. If one's non-alcoholic, the other one will be. In the fraternal twins, a typical result is about 50% concordance. So if one's alcoholic, there's a 50-50 chance that the other one will be, when the average rate in the community is only 5 or 10. So it's a very much elevated chance. Whereas in identical twins, it's 80%. If one is alcoholic, the other one's going to be alcoholic 8 out of 10 times. And so that distinction between the fraternal and the identical, only way to explain it, genetics. Okay, this is in scientific terms, that's called triangulation. So you're taking, like you're reading a map with a compass and you're taking bearings from different angles, but you're getting the same answer. There is a biological basis to alcoholism. There's a third line of studies, and the one I like to quote best is the one you probably thought of first. Does it run in families? Okay? And yes, it runs in families, but mostly that doesn't answer the question of is it nature or is it nurture? Was it just, multi-generational trauma sort of thing? And that could be the case, but what do? You get enough data on a large group of people and follow them up for a long period of time. And George Valiant from Harvard, followed up this group for many years. And he was able to say, and he knew so much about the family and the distant family, that he was able to say that the more alcoholics in your family, the more likely you are to become alcoholic. But that still could be just the nurture rather than nature. What he was able to say was whether you lived with them or not. So the 14-year-old boy who lived with an alcoholic stepfather and had no alcoholic uncles or aunties, he was less likely to become alcoholic than the 14-year-old boy who had a single mum because her alcoholic husband had died young and who had 6 uncles who were alcoholic, or even who had the one in the family of 6 boys who had a father who wasn't alcoholic and the other 5 uncles all were. That one was more likely than the one who lived with the alcoholic that he wasn't related to. So the more alcoholics in your family, the more likely you are to be alcoholic, whether you live with them or not. So that's yet a third bearing. The fourth one that sometimes comes up, genes. I am aware of 4 specific genes that have come up and have been found to be relevant to the development of alcoholism. I think we've got one Asian in the room, one East Asian. It's really common amongst East Asians to get a flushing response to alcohol. And for those of you who've been on antabuse, when you drink on top of antabuse, you go red and your heart palpitates and so on. And that's because the antabuse blocks an enzyme. And about 80% of East Asian people have got a less efficient form of that same enzyme. So it's not like they're on antabuse, but they're on antabuse light. And so, which means that not that there's no alcoholism in East Asia. The Koreans and Chinese and Japanese have been known to give it a nudge, for sure. But the rates are lower. The rates are lower. So that we know that that's one gene that's relevant. And there's 3 other genes that have been shown to be relevant. One, unsurprisingly, around dopamine. So dopamine's been shown to be relevant for addiction, and a particular allele of dopamine, a genetic variant. Strand of DNA that produces the receptor is different, and if you've got a different form of it, probably makes your reward pathway a little more hungry. And so you have to go harder to get the hit, and that increases your chances of developing alcoholism. And another one, a variant on the main sedative hormone, the main sedative neurotransmitter in the brain. It's called GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. That receptor is a bit different in some too. And serotonin, there's a serotonin receptor. So there's only been 4 found, but each of them explain a tiny proportion of the variance. What does that mean? That means that they're scientifically proven to be related, but there's not 1 or even 3 or 4 alcoholic genes, and that's it. If you get that gene, you're going to have it. It's like blue eyes or blood type. It's like, oh, you got that gene, you're going to have it. No, it's much more complex than that. It is polygenetic. So you need lots of genes. And so that's why, in that case, there's going to be lots of sporadic cases. That is, you need, say, 20 genes out of 40 or 50 to be at high risk. And your dad's only got 10 and your mum's only got 10, but you've lucked out and you've got 10 from each of them, and therefore you're at risk. And I don't think that there's any genetic complement that can make you invulnerable. I think if you try hard enough, if you drink and drug hard enough for long enough, just about everybody gets addicted. But what the scientists say nowadays is that something of the order of 50 to 60% of the outcome of alcoholism is explained just by your genetics. And so that's why I insert this talk in the series of 4, comes after the reward pathway. Everybody's got one. That's where the addiction lives. But people with a certain type of genetics can be much more likely to become addicted. It's complex. So over the next 50 years, science will begin to better and better unravel the connection between genes and environment and addiction. Thank you.